Greetings, star citizens everywhere. This is Alpha 3.5 and we are looking at the new flight model. So, if you didn't know that we got the new flight model with 3.5, where have you been? Everyone's been talking about it, but in any case, maybe you don't follow the game that closely, maybe you've heard about the new flight model, you don't know what it's all about. What I'm going to do with this video is not give you my opinion on the model so much as show you how it works. I will probably make a subsequent video during which I'll give you some more thoughts on what I like and what I don't like. For now, the intention is purely to show you how it works, what's the same compared to the previous patches up to 3.4, what's different, what do you need to be on the lookout for, etc, etc. So, here's what we're going to do. First off, let me just check if I've got that set. No. Before I can do anything, I quickly need to... Well, let's maybe do this. Let me zoom into the HUD here and show you what's happening. So, you'll notice, if you know what the HUD looks like from previous iterations, that this is a little different. Down here, we have got... let me just go back here. We've got a couple of new icons that have shown up. So on the right hand side here, let me just maybe zoom out a little bit so you can see what's going on. We've got fuel indicator is now all the way over there. Down here I suspect is the G safety indicator, although I've yet to confirm that, but I think this means my G safety is on. The G-force meter, speaking of G-force, is back. So those of you enjoyed seeing your G readout, you can now see that again. That's all the way down there. Then on the left hand side, probably one of the biggest changes is a velocity gauge and velocity indicator. You'll see there's a little red notch down there, which I'll get to in a bit. So that about covers it. Another thing that's maybe worth just showing you quickly is landing gear now has a handy little icon down there, which you can activate independent of any sort of flight mode. So landing gear can go up or down. You don't have to be in precision mode as you were previously, because precision mode is gone. That's one of the first things that we should probably talk about, is the difference in flight modes. So there's landing mode, and just that's now not landing mode anymore as such. It's just purely lowering your or raising your landing gear. Coupled versus decoupled also has a new icon. So if I switch on decoupled mode, you'll see a little icon appear down on the right hand side that sort of looks like a, I don't know, I guess a broken paperclip or something, but it's supposed to indicate that you are now in decoupled mode. So, alright, just go back. So that's the new HUD for the most part. Let's talk about flight itself. So what is the same and what is different? If you just quickly do my basic strafe control, well, we'll start off actually with axis movement. So your normal yaw and pitch and roll works exactly the same as it used to. There's nothing different about that. I should probably mention, for the purpose of this video, I'm doing this in my Aurora because that's the ship I fly. Your experience may differ depending on the ship that you use, but since the Aurora is a very common starter ship that a lot of people have, I thought it would be useful to use this for the demonstration. And then I'm flying using a flight stick. So a lot of people I know play with mouse and keyboard. The more serious flight simmers among us maybe even have something like a HOTAS. I've just got a basic 12-button joystick with a throttle and a hat switch. So that's what I'm going to be using for this. The controls themselves are similar regardless of the control input that you use. I'm not going to refer necessarily to joystick control specifically. Whatever you use, you'll find a key binding to do what I'm going to show you in this video. So, for starters, let's do a quick strafe, which is side to side movement, and that works as it always has. So if I'm in coupled mode, and let me just go to external view to show this to you better, I'm strafing to the left. You'll notice my thrusters are firing to let me strafe to the left. As soon as I let go of the strafe button, my ship applies retro thrust and brings itself to a stop. So let's go in the opposite direction, going right, and retro thrust, and now I stop. The same thing happens if you strafe up and strafe down. So all of that works the way it used to. If you go to coupled mode, let's just do that quick, or decoupled mode rather. So just quickly, I'm bumping up my speed limiter, which I'll explain to you in just a moment. So if I go to decoupled mode as before, all I now have to do is apply thrust and then let go, and the ship will continue to move in whatever direction I've applied thrust until I manually apply counter thrust to either bring it to a stop or start moving in another direction. So here you can, let's say, start a drift to the right and then decide you also want to go a little bit forward. So now you're sort of going along the diagonal. The moment, however, that I switch back to coupled mode, my ship brings itself to a stop. Alright, so let's talk about how thrust affects the way that you fly. So we've looked at directional thrust. Strafing works exactly the way that it always has. What's new, and probably the biggest change in the new flight model for everyone to get used to, is this bar on the left hand side that I was talking about earlier. So there's two things you need to look at. The first is the red notch over here, which sort of indicates where your, shall we say, the old SCM mode that you used to use for space combat maneuvering, the limit at which your ship can do a turning dogfight without you blacking out and without the ship sliding too much in turns. That's indicated at more or less this point. And so I've set my speed limit over there to coincide with that red notch. And so let me quickly thrust forward and you'll see what happens. Now also keep an eye on the G meter and obviously the velocity readout. So we're going forward, and you'll notice that my ship accelerates only up to the blue line, which is the speed limiter. While I'm accelerating, you can see the G-force meter rising. Now that I've reached a stable velocity, no more accelerations being applied, which means the G-force is back down to 0. Now if I let go of the thrust, I decelerate, ship speed comes back down, and obviously I get G-force in the opposite direction. Now the same thing happens, here's the interesting bit with the speed limiter, the same thing happens regardless of the direction that I'm moving in. So if I go to the right, let's strafe to the right a little, the ship still accelerates up to the speed limit to exactly the same velocity, and I still get G's. However, because my maneuvering thrusters are not as powerful as my mains, you'll notice that the G-force during strafing is a lot less than if you are going along your longitudinal axis, which obviously is where your main thruster sits. So you get about 2.3 G's of lateral acceleration, but you can travel at the same speed in any direction. So if I strafe up, the same thing happens. The ship accelerates slower than it would if you are going in your main thruster direction, but I still get to the same 144 meters per second. So the G-force indicator indicates G's no matter what direction you're traveling in, and the velocity meter exactly the same thing. It doesn't indicate forward speed, it indicates velocity no matter what vector you are traveling along. So you get a true speed readout on your velocity indicator. Now, if I want to travel forward without constantly holding the throttle down, I can engage what is known as cruise mode. So I've got my speed limit set to more or less SCM speeds. Now I'm going to turn on the cruise control, like turning on cruise control when you're driving long distance in your car. So let's do that. Alright, now the ship accelerates up to the speed that I've set on the speed limiter, and I'm not holding any buttons down. It's just staying or maintaining forward thrust up to the speed limit automatically. And this is probably as close as you're going to get to the 3.4 flight mode. So I can now maneuver around and do my thing you'll see that the ship turns reasonably tightly. Just want to get away from the edge of this map, because Arena Commander maps unfortunately are quite small, and I don't want to fly out of bounds now. What you definitely will notice is one of the biggest differences in this flight model compared to the previous one is that it is a lot more slidey. I don't suppose there's a better word for that, but because it's very main centric, so your main thruster is by far the most powerful, if you turn, because you've built up a fair amount of forward momentum, it takes a bit more time for your maneuvering thrusters to get you back on center after you've made the turn. So the ship continues to travel forward for a fairly long distance before your maneuvering thrusters can right you in the new direction you want to go, which is fine. That is what you would expect with a more powerful center engine and slightly weaker maneuvering thrusters. And obviously then what that means is the faster you're going, the more exaggerated this effect becomes. So if I pick up speed, and that's now the interesting thing about the speed limiter, is I can now start accelerating past that red line and pick up speed. And so the ship's now traveling faster, and I can still maneuver. However, whoop, let me get away from the edge. The net effect of this now, I really need to avoid this edge. The net effect of this is it takes me a lot longer to change direction. So let me slow down. And now my ship corrects back to center line a lot quicker. So at lower speeds, it's a lot easier to make tight turns, whereas the faster you go, let's accelerate up again. The faster you go, the more slidey your turns become. So you'll notice I'm changing the direction that my nose is pointing in, but the ship wants to keep on going in the direction I was traveling at. And you can hear those thrusters are working to try and get me back on center. So come on, baby. Here we are. So the faster you're going, the longer it takes you to make any sort of a course correction. So the cool thing about this is you can accelerate up to any speed at any time. You don't have to change flight modes at all. You just change your speed limit. And even when traveling at your ship's maximum speed, you can still make turns. It just takes a lot of effort for your ship, specifically for the maneuvering thrusters, to point you in the direction that you want to go. So preferably for combat, you want to stay below that red line, which enables you to make tighter turns. But if you need to add a burst of speed, you can do that. Alright, so that's cruise control and the speed limiter. And let me just quickly disable cruise and bring things to a stop here. So one other thing I quickly want to show you. I'll just accelerate up there. There's one last change that you need to be aware of compared to the old one. So the old flight model used to have boost, which is a mode where you push extra power to your maneuvering thrusters in order to make tighter turns, obviously at the cost of more heat and more fuel burn. And then you had Afterburner, which is a way for you to exceed your top speed. Now, thanks to this new speed scale and the fact that you can accelerate right up to the speed limit, there is no more Afterburner. In order to travel at maximum speed, all you need to do is set your speed limiter slider all the way to the top, and in fact there's a toggle that you can use to turn the speed limiter off entirely. So I can, let's say, leave it over there, then I hit the disable speed limiter button and I'll be able to accelerate up to maximum speed. Let me maybe just quickly show you that. So if I turn on cruise control now, the ship just keeps on accelerating and it'll keep on going all the way up until it reaches my maximum speed, which I don't want to do now because I don't have space on this map to maneuver that far. So I'm already getting close to the edge of the boundary again. But let's just come to a stop. So the Afterburner is gone, but there is still a mode called Afterburner, and Afterburner now is simply what boost used to be. So it's a way for you to shunt more power to your thrusters and accelerate faster. So let's say I turn my speed limiter back on again. I'm now flying at more or less SCM speed. So again, keep an eye on the G meter. I accelerate now up to 138, and I peaked at around 5.4 Gs, I think it was. And now we decelerate at about 4 Gs, and then we're back to 0 again. If I do the same thing but holding Afterburner, I get double the acceleration. And just turn my speed limiter up a little bit so you can see that more clearly. So thrusting forward, 5.4 Gs, up to the speed limiter, decelerate back down again. Then we do the same thing and we hit Afterburner, whoop, 10.8 Gs. So you can hear the engine screaming because I'm pushing a lot more power to my thrusters. Now obviously this does burn more fuel, and also it creates quite a lot of heat, especially for maneuvering thrusters. So this is one system that they are still playing with when it comes to the new model, is thruster heat. If you do quite a lot of intensive maneuvering, your thrusters will overheat fairly quickly. That's still being balanced out. I found that just during the course of a dogfight, even without using Afterburner, my thrusters tend to overheat, so that's definitely not what you want. There's still some tweaks required to make that work. But yeah, I can see where they're going with this. The idea is for you to not constantly use Afterburner during a dogfight. You want there to be a downside to it. So you get quick acceleration, but you're going to burn through your fuel a lot faster, and you will potentially overheat your thrusters and cause overheating in some of your other systems. If you damage your thrusters, the handling of your ship obviously will be affected. So those are all things you'll need to keep in mind during a dogfight. Alright, that about covers it. This took quite a bit longer than I thought it would, but there is a fair amount of information to get through. So I hope this was useful to you. Just explaining what the new flight model looks like and how it works. I have not, as I said anything about my actual opinion on whether this is good or bad. I will make a subsequent video with maybe some of my likes and dislikes, but hopefully you'll now have enough info to get started and make the transition from the flight that we're all used to the new model in 3.5. So enjoy and see you in the next video.